Hi, everybody. I'm Lorraine the Lawyer. I am an attorney based in Los Angeles. I am here to break down the Ricky Martin lawsuit that has just been filed. I am very excited to go through the complaint with you, explain all the different causes of action, their strengths and weaknesses, and I have my dear friend Ari with me, who is going to help to produce my first video with you today. And a little bit about me. So I have been managing my law firm for over a decade. We have particular expertise in immigration and also business transactional law. And this particular case is near and dear to me because I grew up with Ricky Martin. So here we go.
All right. Well, Lorraine,
Right.
I'm super excited about your first video. And I requested for you to do this specific case because I'm a talent agent, manager, and work with talent. And so I sort of understand, why somebody might be filing this case, but there's always two sides to every story. So it's very interesting to break it down. And also, I grew up with Ricky Martin too. My mom had two cats. One of them was Ricky and one of them was Martin. That's how much we love Ricky Martin. And so, he's a cultural icon in the Latin countries. I'm excited to hear the breakdown. I'm going to pull up the complaint that you sent me.
So in June 29, 2020, there was, of course, a very long time manager of Rebecca Drucker, who filed this $3 million lawsuit against Ricky Martin. And what she is alleging is that there are unpaid commissions that were due to her based on an oral agreement, oral contract, and this also coupling a toxic work environment that she alleges that she was in, where she was constantly mistreated, lied to, and even generally manipulated. She is not just naming Ricky Martin in this lawsuit, she is also naming his touring company, which handles all of Ricky Martin's touring needs, and that is Gansha Touring, as well as his longtime lawyer, Garrett Glass. So what we'll do is we'll move through each one of the causes of actions. We'll look at which defendant it applies to, and going into whether or not, what the legal point of view is, as well as the points of strength and weaknesses for each claim that she makes. And I really want to put out a disclaimer that these are the initial pleadings. So they are pretty sparse on detail. And we want to be mindful that in the next several months, we're going to have discovery happening. And with that, there'll be a lot more information that's going to be released. So it's going to get juicier and juicier and juicier. Whether that will be sealed by the judge is really stands to be known, is an open question at this point, since her allegations are pretty salacious at the moment, and Martin's team will probably have to fight pretty hard to keep the whole thing under wraps. So I think we should just go over some of the key facts here, because I think the timeline is really important to understand the different causes of action. We're about to get very detailed. All right. Ready? Okay, let's do this. So this is really interesting. The complaint actually says that there was a pre-existing relationship between Ricky Martin and Rebecca Drucker that was quite personal. They were friends, and they toured the world together starting in about the early 2000s. It really wasn't until about 2013, 2014 that the topic, I guess, and then moving to an actual hiring for Rebecca as becoming his official manager. And it was at this time that Rebecca states that she was responsible for bringing in Garrett Glass, the attorney that she's also naming in this lawsuit, and that she had known him for years. So there was also a pre-existing relationship there. Really interesting. Wow, all of these layers of relationships here. And she had believed that it was important that Ricky take on Mr. Glass because she felt that he specifically would be best for protecting Martin's interests. So everything seemed to go great with their working relationship until about February 2018, when supposedly there was a quote unquote ugly incident in Dubai that was involving Ricky Martin's representative, Jose Verga. And this apparently prompted Rebecca to resign. And the pleadings indicate that there might have been some other incidences as well in this time, but she specifically names this, in particular, Jose Verga, that things were collapsing. So after she quit, she alleges that Ricky Martin's whole career was taking a massive nosedive, and his personal life became an absolute train wreck. And with this worsening personal and professional situation, Martin then constantly started reaching out to Miss Drucker and was begging her to come back and serve as his manager. So after months of refusing, she finally agreed to take up the position again. And this was when, in May 2020, she states that the official standard oral talent management agreement was put in place. Notice it was oral, nothing written. And this was with not only Ricky Martin, but also Ricky Martin Enterprises, Gansha Touring as well. And she states that, she was kind of reeled back in with the understanding that she was to be paid out 5% commission of the gross income generated from all projects that Ricky Martin would be procuring, negotiating for, and then also, that Rebecca performed services during the term of her management agreement. So essentially, to state it briefly, if Ricky Martin got paid, Rebecca was going to get her 5% of the gross. So it really just it wasn't seemingly just a professional relationship. And she seems to also imply this in the pleading, that she really was protecting Martin's reputation. And she was the guardian of that reputation. And in September 2020, she alleges that she stood next to Martin and she read a letter to him that indicated to him that a highly respected litigation attorney was actually filing a lawsuit against him that was catastrophic. If he did not pay money to resolve a specific claim made by the attorney's client against Martin, that the consequences would be catastrophic and would cause his career to collapse. And interestingly enough, Martin, apparently witnesses have said in this pleading, collapsed when this all happened. And Rebecca states that it was she is the one that was the heroine in that moment and came to his rescue and brought in top defense attorneys in Los Angeles. And through her actions, those devastating claims really went away. She found very good defense attorneys who well defended Martin, and his career was saved. And it was really because of her exceptional managerial and advisory services, reputation management, that he was able to walk away from this. What's kind of a little bit of a small irony here, if we want to just step away and kind of look at the big picture for a second and just even these facts, is that Ricky Martin has threatened Rebecca. And she says that Rebecca states that Ricky Martin threatened her and is attempting to make her sign an agreement for non-disclosure clause. Yeah, so it almost seems that he is attempting to make her sign this agreement, similar to the kind of nature of the way that Rebecca was dealing with his these difficult situations that were coming up for him. So he was kind of learning of how to handle these types of situations.
Because of what she... Wow.
Right. So that we're not allowing Rebecca's devastating claims to see the light of day for him. So interestingly enough, it's almost like Rebecca's example and how to really handle troublesome or potentially litigious, former associates. So I
Interesting.
think, around May 2020, it appears that things started to deteriorate again. And Rebecca had to deal with a very problematic nanny that Ricky Martin had hired to care for his children. There were failure to pay taxes. His substance abuse was mentioned here and other issues. Notice her mentioning of failure to pay taxes. On July 30th, 2021, things then seemed to come ahead for Rebecca as she emailed Martin officially notifying him that she was resigning, and she states that Martin was absolutely panicked and contacted her and begged her not to quit, and decided to up the ante in terms of how much he was offering her on the percentage in order to keep her. And at
He
that
promised
moment,
her 10%.
right, went from 5 to 10% on commissions. And she states that the attorney, Garrett Glass, again, she had that pre-existing relationship with Mr. Glass as well, she states, allegedly affirmed that Rebecca's commissions had indeed been raised to 10%. So unable to resist whether Rebecca withdrew her resignation and staying on as officially his manager, all here. But again, all these alleged promises were not put in writing. So according to Rebecca, the defendants after this time actively concealed contracts from her, lied to her about amounts of money that she had received, and made very disparaging comments about her behind her back. And then when Rebecca requested payment, she apparently was refused. And while the complaint is not very specific, it appears that she was paid absolutely nothing of the commissions that they had agreed, or orally, she alleges, that were owed to her. So by April 2020, Rebecca then officially resigned for good, and that was the final time. So there's, I think, a few from these facts that we've just gone over. I think that there are a few points of special note that come out of this. I would say one is that the oral contract, an oral contract of this magnitude, it almost appears, to me anyway, that it's really kind of hard to believe that this many professional, we're talking Ricky Martin, okay? He is one of the leaders of the Latin American music industry, if not film, television. My goodness, at the very top percent, right? So how many professional managers, agents, lawyers floating around at that time, and not one of them thought it would be better to get a written contract laying out the exact terms of what Rebecca Drucker would be owed?
This is what's really interesting about this, though, is that when I dealt with the New York Times writing an article about how I was basically taking advantage of these people, part of the thing that they said is that traditional talent agencies don't make you sign a physical contract. And so I don't know if this is sort of like an industry standard in Hollywood where they don't have you sign an actual contract, but it's so dangerous because then this situation happens, it's a handshake, and then, but don't you think that how could they file a lawsuit if they don't have text messages or anything? They don't have to show that right now, right?
Well, it's it certainly can come out in the discoveries later. What WhatsApps were coming, what writings could have been made in emails, etc. And maybe there were, and I hope there are, with this many professionals at this level that were involved. And while it's true that really oral contracts can be valid in the law, there is such a ginormous hill to climb to prove that they are valid. And it's a lot steeper, that it's an uphill battle, so if there was some kind of signed paper stating that everything was black and white, that would be great. If there was some kind of something.
And that's why I think it's important, regardless of what the industry standard is, people should, if you're going to get in an agreement. Here's the thing with the manager. I'm sorry, but a manager is working for free until you make money. So why would she be doing all this stuff if there wasn't an agreement that she would be paid? That's, I want to
And
see both sides here, but I see this happening in Hollywood where people sort of try to,
that
manipulate the situation. I don't know what happened in this case.
I do note I do note what you're stating, and I recognize what you're stating. I think it's actually pretty hard to believe that Rebecca worked for so long without any payment. She seems to allege that she never saw any commissions for over a year, even though Martin had very large contracts and goes ahead and lists them, right? That she
These
was
are all the ones that are listed here.
right.
Nescafe.
How
Now,
could she
what
not
I'm
have
interested,
known that money was coming in? And how could Martin and his team keep so many contracts secret from her for so long?
well, but didn't she have to know that these deals happen in order to put them in here? Like, how did she know what was
This
made
is
and
what I
everything?
find confusing. It almost looks as if she worked from 2014, like when she worked from 2014 to 2018. How was she working then? How were the payments being tracked then? I think that that's really important to dig into and discovery and kind of
Hmm.
comparing the different time periods. Is she willing to work for over a year without payment? It seems very interesting anyway. And I think, again, it just needs to be fleshed out more in further discovery and pleadings. But at this moment in time, it's looking like a quite, initial weakness here in this pleading for sure.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe this pleading was made to attract media attention by the way that what she includes in it
I mean, I
to get like
hate
a
to say
settlement
it,
or
and I hate using this word, but there are portions of this which, I think, any skilled attorney worth their salt would be like, kind of sounds a little bit like blackmail here, because she's saying that, she's knowledgeable of this letter September 2020 from an unknown lawyer in Los Angeles making a catastrophic allegation against Ricky Martin. So, an entertainment lawyer, I do a lot of entertainment. What is catastrophic? Usually something sexual, something like that. I don't, obviously we saw just recently in the last couple of days that there actually has been an allegation made by his nephew now, stating that there was an intimate relationship and now suddenly this restraining order. So, I
oh my
mean,
gosh.
did she in fact know about that? Is Rebecca essentially saying in this pleading that I know something really damaging about you and it might just have to come out at trial? But then the subtext is, hey, I won't talk or I will talk. Maybe my willingness to talk or not talk is completely dependent on whether I get paid out or not here. But it's she's hanging it out there, that's for sure here. And also, I think it's interesting as a corollary here is that she mentions his substance abuse, and big time here she mentions failure to pay taxes. So the tax issue may
Oh,
be big interest to the IRS, and one could then
oh my
leap
gosh.
to the next thought, which is if she knows something that damaging, she may be, sending a message to Ricky Martin here that she's prepared to talk to the IRS and potentially even
Oh,
criminal investigation into Martin's tax issues. So substance abuse issues would make for, like, I would say, like, great tabloid gossip and grab
right.
headlines, making him out to be much less.
Same thing with this one. This
Yeah,
is the one that you were talking about earlier. Rick.
yeah, I think she's going right for the throat. um this woman is
Yeah.
upset. She is upset, and she didn't get paid, it appears. So a sympathy that would otherwise potentially be exercised toward Ricky Martin may not be, when thinking about tax issues and substance abuse problems. So
Mhm.
so just to note that. And I think that, the raise really from 5 to 10% that Martin allegedly promised to Rebecca, is very problematic because it's, again, an oral promise only. And it comes down to a he said, she said thing then.
Right. Well,
And the pleadings even state that. I mean, they even fully admit that. So,
really? Well,
yeah, I mean,
here's
it's just
one thing I was
it's
going to ask
oral.
you. There's two things that are interesting because of what I went through my experience that I find interesting is number one, there in California, which this was filed, correct? In California,
Hmm.
there's a law that if you procure work, so um, if there's any documents, or sorry, if there's any emails where she is procuring work, or there's anybody that says, yeah, I did this deal with Rebecca, and she doesn't have a talent agency license, from what I understand. And, a lot of attorneys don't even know the full scope of the whole talent agency license. But if you procure work and you are not a licensed agent, then the then the talent can actually sue you in at the with the labor commissioner for basically operating with without a talent agency license. And I'm wondering why, if she said she had a hand in putting some of these deals together, unless she has a talent agency license, I wonder why that's not their defense. Or it wouldn't really be a defense. It would be like they would file a separate case against her in the labor commission.
Yes,
So
I do
she
think
either
that
didn't,
multiple layers here for sure. I'm glad you
yeah,
mentioned that. Yeah,
like she
it's
either didn't have any hand in actually doing these deals, which would have been proper as a straight out manager. And she just really oversaw his career, or she was breaking the Talent Agencies Act and the talent agency law, whatever. But then on top of that, one of the things that an attorney told me when people breached my agreements is, he said, you really won't get a lot of work in Hollywood if you go around suing clients. So what do you think? Don't you think this is going to affect other people that might want to be rep by her when they see, like, she might destroy Ricky Martin's career with this lawsuit, depending on how it goes? I would feel some type of way by hiring her as my manager, knowing all this drama. So it really is
mhm.
uh, a choice you have to make. And it's unfortunate, right? Because you should be able to go after your money if you were really promised these things. But the other layer that comes on is like, what are other talents going to think about you,
Right,
knowing
right,
that you're capable of attacking the talent like this? It's catch
right.
22 of it.
Yeah, managers are responsible for reputation management. And she's making a gutsy move here for sure. I mean, we see, in the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard trial here that, I mean, defamation, it might not necessarily work out the way that you are hoping it to work out. So,
Right.
got to be really careful when you start treading into this water. And I think California juries and judges are, you know, it's kind of exemplary or presidential to say now that, it can be quite damaging overall if things do not go in your favor. So yeah,
Right.
point well taken. I think, it's a little hard to believe that Rebecca was hired on to manage some extremely private aspects of Ricky Martin's career, and that she wouldn't be required to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Oh, there
Um,
was no,
why
yeah,
is that?
interesting.
Is there something about,
Even
because
I
I mean,
had a non-disclosure agreement with my clients,
right? But I mean, is there something about
TikTokers,
their
or Ricky
past?
Martin.
I think it'll be interesting what comes out in discovery because, they knew each other and they were friends since the early 2000s. That's a long time. What
Hmm.
happened? What transpired and all there? If everyone was okay with a contract of this magnitude being oral, maybe no one thought to protect Ricky Martin from someone in his inner circle who could cause him great harm, and then make Rebecca sign an NDA. And
Well,
again, So
Yeah.
I think it just kind of, it's like an aha moment, I guess, when when you're reading this pleading. I think that this things don't add up necessarily. But
But
again,
even if
there's
she were to have signed a non-disclosure, couldn't she still file a lawsuit alleging breach of contract and add all those things to the case without it being breaching NDA? Because
it's if you have a really good NDA, and in some cases also a non-circumvent, it's really hard to get around that. So I mean, you can sue anyone for anything, right? In California, you can make someone's life a living hell. And often people refer to the litigation system as a war of attrition on who prevails. But it's I think earlier discussions, whatever circumstances and the details that were surrounding the formation of these relationships, I think are really important as we go into this trial. But at this point, I think it would be really good to briefly review each cause of action and what it really means to Martin and the other defendants. So firstly, breach of oral contract against not only Martin, but Ricky Martin Enterprises and also Gansha Touring. So Rebecca claims that 3 dependents entered into a valid oral contract with her regarding her commission structure. And she claims she upheld her end of the bargain, providing services with the expectation of receiving her promised commissions. So allegedly, Ricky Martin and the other defendants named in this cause of action, according to her, failed to pay all amounts owed under the oral management agreement. All amounts owed. That's pretty steep. So that's the first. Then she goes into the second. And I think it's really interesting how the first and second cause of action then bleeds into the third. So the second cause of action is a breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. And this is against now Martin, Ricky Martin Enterprises, and Gansha Touring. So all 3. And she claims that all the contracts have an implied promise for the parties to be fair with each other and act in good faith when dealing with one another. And essentially that you wouldn't be underhanded or dishonest to the party that you contract with. And her allegations are that Martin and his fellow dependents engaged in truly bad faith conduct to ensure that Rebecca just would not get paid under the contract. So they were in bad faith doing these dealings underhandedly. And so she states that if the court were to find that there was no oral contract, and thus then also denying her second cause of action, breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, that then at the very least, she should be granted a quantum meriat, which is Latin for what one has earned. And she asked for the court to determine the value of her services to the defendants and then award that amount to her. So this is the fair market value of Rebecca's services, not the actual value, but the fair market value. And she asked the court to do that calculation if they do not grant the first 2 causes of action. So, and that would be if they don't see an oral contract here. So essentially she's saying that she performed services for Ricky Martin and the other defendants at the defendant's request with the understanding that Rebecca would be compensated. But since defendants had failed to then pay her, she is valuing her services at over $3 million and then asking for a trial to prove that exact amount. So quite interesting how those 3 causes of action are working together. And I mean, she's just okay. And I think, again, like I said earlier, it feels like she's going for the throat. I would say that because when you look at the 4th cause of action, she's like taking it even a step further. She's going, all right, fine. If there's even problems with all 3, then let's look at it from the perspective of an unjust enrichment claim, which
Ah,
essentially
okay.
in law, yeah, against all defendants. It's somewhat similar to the quantum Marriott cause of action, but it comes into effect for the court to determine that there was no. So this claim would only come into effect if the court would determine, again, that there's no enforceable oral contract. So unjust enrichment would be when a party is unjustly enriched by the labor or services of another. And for Rebecca to prevail, she would need to show that the defendants knew they were getting the benefit. So she would have to show that she was allegedly managing all aspects of Ricky Martin's life and that the defendants accepted and retained the benefits. Like, for example, that they knew that Rebecca was helping Martin and that they were getting lucrative contracts and she was helping run his musical and professional career, and that it would be unfair or inequitable for Ricky Martin and his co-defendants not to pay for those services.
Right.
So yeah, so
So
it's
they're
alleged,
allowed to just throw the kitchen sink in there and sort of say, okay, well, if
right,
this one doesn't work, then this. That's how it works.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. She is just throwing everything at the wall here. And you know, she's so if Rebecca basically is alleging here making multiple demands for payment and her services were made with the expectation of payment, it would then be unfair, according to this cause of action, to let the defendants keep the value of her hard work because they benefited. So then the difference between quantum Marriott and unjust enrichment is that unjust enrichment is looking at the actual value and not just the fair market value. So she's like, all right, there. And, you know, I thought then she goes, so it's throwing the kitchen sink. But at the same time, I thought it was really interesting that she puts in the cause of action for promissory fraud against all defendants.
That's
This
the
one,
fifth one.
I think, promissory fraud, the fifth one. This one actually, I think, could make some logical, reasonable. I could see the rationale here. So she alleges that Martin and Glass, as well as all the other defendants, made oral promises to Rebecca that they were going to pay her commissions, but they had no intention of ever paying them. So she's leaning into the intent issue here. Underhanded, but intentional, getting her to do free work. She believed that the defendants, she believes that, intentionally lying to Rebecca to induce her to keep working for Ricky Martin gives rise for a potential for punitive and exemplary damages. And then from this says, well, then that could very well far outweigh the actual damages that she claims she has of 3 million. So punitive damages
Oh,
are meant
wow.
to punish and deter bad actions of defendants. So this may be a massively huge award. So it's getting into that intent. It's getting into that, the bigger picture of the actual damages, and it's really about, okay, society, okay, Ricky Martin, okay, what you stand for. Society doesn't want to be setting this example. Like, this is actually a chance to right the wrong in terms of hopefully mitigating this ever happening again, and like deterring people from doing this. So we want to really punish here so that we can prevent others from being copycats and thinking that it's okay to be doing this, and attacking it from that angle. So it's worth really playing up this angle of the lawsuit, I think, since this is where the real meat of the award might end up being. And if Ricky Martin is found liable for punitive damages, he might be on the hook then for an absolutely insane amount of damages. So that's interesting to me. The sixth and the seventh causes of action, the sixth one seems like a real stretch. So this is very similar to
Why does that seem like a stretch to you?
Yeah, it's negligent misrepresentation.
Why do you think it's a stretch?
Because So negligent misrepresentation is similar to promissory fraud, but with the defendants just being negligent in making the promise. So we're moving away from intent. Now we're saying negligent in making the promise that Rebecca was going to receive a raise from 5 to 10% in commissions. Because it is only negligence, there is no possibility of punitive damages then, because it's negligence, not intentional. So the initial number that she talks about for damages is around 3 million, right? So there's no way to get at that number because you can't from the perspective of punitive damages. So according to the complaint, Ricky Martin and his co-defendants had no grounds for believing the promise to raise Rebecca's commission to 10% was true, but they said it anyway. So Rebecca relied on that. So she was damaged when she discovered the defendant's negligence. It just seems hard to prove or believe. And in my opinion, and if Ricky Martin made the promise to raise her commission to 10%, but he had no reason to believe that that was true, how is it mere negligence and not an intentional act? They just are like conflicting with each other here. This count almost feels like we are just throwing the absolute kitchen sink into the complaint. And if there's no contract and no unjust enrichment and quantum merit, that didn't work either, then we'll try to find fraud and negligence, misrepresentation. Perhaps Rebecca can argue that Glass made a negligent misrepresentation when he asserted Rebecca would get 10% and he hadn't checked with Ricky Martin to make sure this was true. Okay, maybe that could be the angle, but overall, this just seems like a very
what is the negative thing as far as in the court system, in your experience, about putting too much in a lawsuit? Like, what can go wrong if you're an attorney and you throw the kitchen sink? I guess, what are the negative aspects of doing that or the positive?
Believability, especially, from a judge's perspective, this is going to be obviously getting in front of a judge. You're trying to, present a clearly thought out, coherent set of arguments. You do not want to be putting forth frivolous claims. And that's a very serious thing in the legal world, where you're just wasting court time, wasting resources, because you want to give someone a hard time. So it just raises questions as to what the real intent is here for. Is it because you didn't get your money? Is it because you're looking to, go for defamation? Sorry, from the defense side, maybe they're looking to go for defamation here. Where are you trying to go for this? It's a gutsy move. Right. Especially from such a seasoned manager. So the last cause of action, accounting against all defendants, what she's basically asking for the court to do is to ensure that all defendants have to provide an accounting of their finances to Rebecca, to show what contracts they entered into and how much money they made off from them. So Rebecca can then determine exactly what she is owed. So it's okay. So just taking this, it's logical to assume that Rebecca didn't have full access to Ricky Martin's full financials. Okay, fine. Maybe he didn't let her see all of that, but wouldn't a very well-placed, experienced manager have at least an idea that tons of contracts were going on around her? And the overall impression that Rebecca gives here is that she was doing everything from Ricky Martin. At the beginning of the complaint, she says every aspect of, his life, professional, reputational. So she knew everything that was going on, but somehow she was completely ignorant of every contract that was happening around her. And, we keep circling back to this point, but Ricky Martin's defense will surely attack. So I would think that probably Ricky Martin's defense will really attack her on this point, as well as on the validity of an alleged oral agreement, only a management contract. So I
Do
think
you
that
think
this
that
part,
any of this has to do with the fact that she didn't know the exact amounts though? Like, let's say like she knew he was doing XYZ, but she didn't know the exact amount of the contract because they're not showing it to her. Like, how does it say any details of what she doesn't know? Like,
well, she did say that she managed every aspect of his life. And,
got
you
it.
know, and so it's just, I think that this is really important to come out again in discovery, is finding out truly the extent of that. Because she's asking for these countries, she's asking for the court to demand a lot of information. And this is a lot of discovery to go through. How could she have not known a lot of this information? So again, it's like, hey, there's information that I have, and she's stating like, I had this information. I knew about this letter. I knew what it would mean to your career. I knew that it would be catastrophic. Well, to what extent did you know all of that? To what extent were you involved from A to Z in Ricky Martin's life? And so what is ultimately coming out of this? Hey, I didn't get paid. I didn't get paid my unpaid commissions. But yet I know all this information, and I haven't yet said what it is. But it's going to come out now, so it's just, it's getting into a very interesting world here for Ricky Martin, and I do note, that he has fully denied, this, any kind of sexual or romantic relationship with his nephew. It definitely can be quite catastrophic. Again, that it feels like a bit of blackmail happening here in this complaint. It's not just from this catastrophic allegation against Ricky Martin with this letter, but also the failure to pay taxes and substance abuse, and what exactly is going on here, with this complaint. So I think that the defense will try to turn the tables this way, or may, consider looking at it this way. I think that that last point is also very important, that we just talked about, which is that the overall impression that Rebecca basically gives is that she was doing everything for Ricky Martin and knew everything that was going on, but somehow completely ignorant of everything in terms of the contracts that was happening around her. Like, it just, it just doesn't seem, it's, I think it's definitely a strike against her, that the defense can dig into there. Right. When she's trying to say, well, I am owed this and I'm owed that. Okay, well, let's really, dig into what it is that you say, you say you had access to, you say you didn't have access to. Now you're asking the court to come up with all of this. And you're ultimately saying that you had a valid oral contract. It's a he said, she said. Could
this get dismissed?
I don't think it's likely to be dismissed, unfortunately. Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be taking this one to trial.
Unfortunately for Ricky Martin, yeah, no.
Yeah, unfortunately, especially with the combined allegation that's been made as well. And she's going to be, they're going to be moving to discovery. So she has other information. So we'll have to see.
And they haven't filed the response yet?
Not yet, not that I see. All right, so the next steps here are that we are given an opportunity to see what the response will be from the defendant, Ricky Martin Enterprises, as well as his lawyer. Once those pleadings are complete, then both parties are really given an opportunity to produce and file documents and substantiate their claims. And the judge is given an opportunity to then decide what motion they're going to be giving once all this is in. So I look forward to very much providing commentary as we move through the next steps.
All right, guys. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this stream. You guys should go follow Lorraine on all her social platforms. They're going to be linked below. And tell the other lawyers on YouTube that they should join one of Lorraine's. If you start doing live streams, they should join you on your live streams. And I think you have a lot of exciting things to talk about, but hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode. Is there anything else you want to include before we sign out?
Stay tuned, because I think this one's going to get juicy, and it's really just begun, I would say. I think this this particular pleading is purposely missing out a lot of information, a lot of detail, because they have a strategy and a plan going forward. And it'll also be interesting to see if the defense is successful in getting some of this information to be taken out of the public eye or not. So let's see what happens. And also, if a defamation suit, if there's going to be cross complaints made by the defendants, and if we're going to see this starting to go down the same road as we have with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. So let's stay tuned. Please keep in mind, as a disclaimer, that nothing in this presentation should be interpreted as legal advice. These presentations I am giving are intended to help a person to understand the area of law and to help ask the right questions with the lawyer of their choice. Your time to act may be very limited, and this could substantially reduce your rights and options. You cannot rely on anything contained in these presentations. This information is really not intended to substitute for professional legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. You should accept legal advice only from a licensed legal professional with whom you have an attorney-client relationship. You should contact a lawyer in your area to assist you in any of those matters.